Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast.
Hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a political nerd and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Ana Sheila Victorino, a queer well-being enthusiast and mindset coach. We are a Latinx empowerment podcast discussing politics, culture, and how to keep your calma with well-being practices and self-love.
Welcome to the show. Woo!
What's up, Tamarindo amiguis? We are back. Brenda, it's nice to see you again. It's been a few weeks. ¿Cómo andas?
Yeah, well, welcome listeners to a traditional, for once, episode of Tamarindo with both Brenda and Ana Sheila. I'm excited to be here. For our listeners, in case you haven't figured this out, we record a few days before you actually hear us. So today is November 2nd, and there's so many Dia de los Muertos activities. And if you're watching us on Zoom, I've got my flowers behind me. It's just a nice couple of days of reflecting and thinking of our loved ones. So that's how I'm doing. How are you, Ana Sheila?
Yeah, Brenda, I think there's a lot of beauty in this time if we let ourselves see it. So yes, I'll agree with that. I am doing well. And I want to start off something I shared on the last episode, but I just want to reiterate for everyone that's listening. I want to reiterate that it's okay to also not be okay right now. And it's okay to also need to take care of yourself. And I bring this up again because I have a few coaching clients and they've really been struggling with feelings of hopelessness, of guilt, of inability to get things done. So I want to just touch on this one more time. And, I think it's really sad because what I feel like is a lot of companies or organizations are sending these like messages, but they are still expecting employees to just get all the same amount of done.
So I just want to be specific, we're referring to, there's so many things going on in the world, but yes, as we've shared in the last several episodes, what I think is top of mind for everyone is the incredible tragedy and loss of life that's happening in Gaza, and just that the fact that we're watching genocide on our social media phones, I think is something that is taking a toll on everybody. So that is what I imagine is what your clients are referring to. Is that right?
Yes, 100%. So thank you for providing that context, Brenda. And it's funny because I go into these sessions and that's not necessarily what we're going to talk about. But then when I, check in with them, do a little grounding exercise, that's really what comes up. And we end up spending so much time on that because they're not feeling really that taken care of in their organizations, And so I just want to say this takes a toll on us, whether we acknowledge it or not. We can try to suppress it, but that doesn't mean it's not taking a physical toll on us and potentially emotional and mental toll on us. So I wanted to call that out. And I want to share that while we may not be able to change certain things, it is really helpful, y'all, to talk about our feelings, to talk about what we're going through with others, to be in community and in compassion for each other. And I think that really sort of leads into our episode today.
Yeah, thanks for taking a moment to pause on that, because we want you all listeners to know that just like you, this is top of mind. This is weighing heavily on us, and it clouds everything that we do. We love this podcast. We approach it with such joy, and it's been very challenging to even feel okay going with our program as usual, because we do bring so much joy. And Ana Sheila reminded me that joy is important. So while you're feeling the heaviness, and it doesn't take away from the pain that we're all collectively feeling at what we're watching, and the frustration about what seems to be a lack of compassion and action, we know that we're all feeling that. And at the same time, it is okay to also experience joy. You all probably celebrated Halloween. You might have made your altar for your loved ones. You might have listened to a new musical artist on an episode of ours. You might have listened to some great stories on the last episode that we shared recently. It's okay to also allow yourself that joy. We are complex beings, and we have multiple dimensions and feelings, and all of these are okay.
Yes. Thank you, Brenda. All right, y'all. Pues our guest today is Alejandra Campoverdi, the author of the memoir First Gen. Alejandra Campoverdi has been a child on welfare, a White House aide to President Obama, a Harvard graduate, a gang member's girlfriend, and a candidate for U.S. Congress. And the book, part memoir, part manifesto, it's a story of generational inheritance, aspiration, and the true meaning of belonging, a gripping journey to reclaim the parts of ourselves we sacrifice in order to survive. And I really want to repeat that sentence because I really think it sticks out, and I really think it's what leads into, what she talks about a lot in the book. It's reclaim the parts of ourselves we sacrifice in order to survive. And so how many of us have really sat to think about what we've sacrificed in order to survive as first gen? Alejandra Campoverdi, she describes the toll of being first gen as a trailblazer toll. Brenda, I know that you've been reading the book. What resonated with you personally?
Well, it's been a fun read. I think that's number one, is that we've had the great pleasure of meeting a lot of people that have taken on the task of writing a memoir. And so every time I sit to read a memoir, it's like, okay, how is this one going to unfold? And I have to say that it took just a few pages to be like, oh my God, give me more of the chisme. So you will read that it opens up with Alejandra really soaking in this amazing opportunity to work at the White House, and that amazing feeling being quickly challenged because of a past picture of her appearing on Maxim, and I was like, "Give me the tea." So it's really well written in that it captivates you, and it's very relatable. I'm only a little bit younger than Alejandra, so just thinking back to middle school and wearing eyeliner as lipstick, and I also had a crush on a cholo, so it was very the music that she refers to, the way she paints the picture of her youth is it's my generation as well. So I think that also has been really fun to just kind of step back and revisit that period in my time. And so if you all are, I imagine that our listeners are a lot like us. So you are all around the same age. I think you will also find that part of it exciting to read, of Alejandra's story. So yeah, I think folks will find it very relatable. So that's really what stuck out for me, is that it's a fun read, and the chisme just I'm like, I want to know what happens next. So, but I want to hear what you think as well. But since I brought up the subject of memoirs and chisme, I also just devoured Britney Spears' memoirs. So if you
tell me about it.
Yeah, if you all need some levity, I guess it's not levity. Honestly, it's not levity because it's quite tragic and sad. She was basically enslaved by her family as a money-making milk cow. Basically, it was really quite horrible, but just it's similar to Alejandra's book, because Britney's also about our age. So just kind of going back to the times that we were listening to Britney Spears on the radio was when we were all like in high school or middle school, and she grew up with us, and just hearing her perspective of all of that has been fascinating as well. So get your memoirs. I love memoirs. So here's a couple that you can read right now.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I love folks that, again, are a bit older than us that are writing these memoirs, because, they've lived some things that, we may have lived part of it, or maybe are on the way to experiencing certain things. And it's been so helpful to see folks articulate things that you have sort of in a nebulous way in your mind, and being like, oh yes, like that is the way that I would describe this toll. And what she does is she does describe a number of different trailblazer tolls that I won't get into because we'll get into it in the interview. But it was just really helpful to see it articulated that way. And it requires us, reading these books, asking ourselves these questions. And so, and it's really helpful. And I think that's how I'm tying back to kind of how we opened this episode. It's so helpful, y'all, to remember that we are not alone in the experiences that we're having, that we are all experiencing a lot of similar things, and that it's helpful to know that we're not alone. It's helpful to speak to other people and seek out other people and community that share these experiences. So with that, I would love to get into this conversation with Alejandra Campoverdi. Tamarindo amiguis. So I am so happy. I'm joined by Alejandra Campoverdi, the author of the memoir First Gen. Thank you so much for being with us on Tamarindo.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being here today.
Yay. Okay, mira. So I'm going to keep it real with you. I know you start your book like that, so I'm going to keep it real with you.
I mean, I like to keep it real. So let's go.
I believe we met several years ago when you were running for Congress. and in LA. And it took me a minute. We got to see each other a few months ago. And I was like, when did I meet her? And I was like, it was when she was running for Congress. And I remember these were my thoughts. And I remember thinking, wow, like this woman, she's perfect. She's so beautiful. She went to Harvard. She worked at the White House. She's running for Congress. She's so accomplished. And I just remember having these thoughts. And I remember, essentially, I saw you as your highlights, right? And while this is all true, your book really focuses on why it's important to pay attention to what's behind or perhaps between or perhaps underneath the highlights, especially for folks that are first gen. And underneath are what you call the unacknowledged emotional tolls of being a trailblazer. And so before we get into what you define those to be, I want to actually know, like, how did you get to this point? Like, was there a specific moment or moments maybe that sort of opened the floodgates to really think about what you had been carrying all these years? Like, how did you start to recognize and articulate these tolls? I'm curious what this process was like for you.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And you really hit the nose on the head about why this felt really important to say, not just for me, but for our community and all of us who at a certain point tend to kind of get distilled down to these bullet points on our resumes, where we went to school, what we accomplished. And to the outside world, it looks really smooth and glossy and linear. And it doesn't look like you made mistakes. It doesn't look like you struggled in between those bullet points. But that's what this book is. It's the spaces between those bullet points. That was important to me. In a lot of ways, I kind of call it the anti-memoir, because this is not about let's look at any sort of accomplishment. It's not so much about let's look at any sort of accomplishment so much as it is looking at what the road was like when you were trying to get there. And many times you gain and lose kind of at equal measure. So where this came to me and really became front and center was that I speak to a lot of young people. I go to a lot of colleges. It's always been important to me to do that. And I started noticing, and I talk about this in the book, being at the Latinx graduation at Harvard and noticing some looks on the students' faces that I had on my face when I would reach these different pinnacles, and there'd be complicated, sometimes contradictory emotions. Because of a lot of our experiences, I call us first and onlys, a lot of our experience tends to kind of be glossed over and sometimes minimized in ourselves. Definitely not always acknowledged by the outside world, but sometimes not even acknowledged in our own experience. At least that was the case for me. So when I had the opportunity to write this book, I said, you know what? I'm going to write a book that's focused on that and what I call the trailblazer toll, which is the many times unacknowledged emotional toll of being a trailblazer.
Yes. Well, I think the work is so important. And I think it's really where we need to be centering right now. I think given a lot of what I think our communities need. So I'm really grateful that you wrote this book. I want to go into what are some of these components of the trailblazer toll. And there are 8 that I think you identify in the book, and we won't get into all of them, but what are a few that you can share with folks? Because I know so many of our listeners, whether in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or beyond, will resonate with at least one, if not all of these, right?
Well, I first want to start by saying that, I'm not a trauma expert or a psychologist, and I really make a point in the book to say that, we're all experts of the first gen experience. I'm sure all your listeners could have written these tolls themselves. The idea is that we name them. There's so much focus on imposter syndrome. And this is a comprehensive experience. It isn't just about imposter syndrome that in a lot of ways moves beyond our life, not just being a first gen student, which is another flashpoint that people focus on a lot. So these 8 that I look at that I'm going to tell you a little bit about right now aren't necessarily meant to be comprehensive. There's, I'm sure, things that I didn't think of, and some people may relate to one or all of them, but the point is to talk about them. And that's what this book is, a deep dive into starting to kind of like sift through our experiences, especially for those of us, to your point, that are in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and we're on the other side of the sausage maker, and we look back and we're like, whoa, what happened? I'm feeling all these mixed emotions and some type of way about the things I went through. And I want to kind of look at that and maybe even heal from a lot of it. One of them that really jumps out is the first, which is invisible inheritances. And we've all kind of heard at this point about the idea of generational trauma, but not only trauma, like what are the cycles and the inheritances, negative, positive, the ones that move through our families' lives that we many times are aware of some of them, but not all of them. So in the book, and one of the best compliments I received about the book is that in a review, that it's a resource, because in the back of the book, what I did is I included a list of different kind of modalities and things that have helped me that I reference in the book, but also a blank genogram. And what a genogram is, it's basically an emotional family tree, but of your emotional inheritances. And there's one that if you want to create one for your own family, because the idea is the relationship of between parents, between grandparents, between siblings, whether it could be love, it could be positive, or it could be control or manipulation or even neglect. So many different relationships and dynamics that predate us, and figuring out what are the ones that we want to continue because they're positive. What are the ones we were born to disrupt, which sometimes those are easier to point at. And many times, though, the positive and the negative ones are intertwined. When I looked at mine, I realized that there were 2 generations of women in my family who had left abusive relationships when they were pregnant, which obviously is something to disrupt. But look at the fortitude it takes to be someone to leave an abusive relationship while you're pregnant. I mean, that is a grit and resilience that I'm proud of being in my lineage. And then the third part, which is what are the invisible inheritances that we want to create? Because I say in the book, every day we have the choice to become a better ancestor. So how can we be intentional about our own ancestral inheritances? So that's the first one. And I'm just going to jump to the last one, because I wish we could go through each and every one, but folks, the book is out.
I'm going to take some notes, but yes.
To go through it. Yeah. So the last one is breakaway guilt. And I know some of my ladies and gentlemen who are on the other side of this may identify with this, which is when you've gone through this process, when you, in many ways, kind of world jumped throughout your life. And whether you come home from being away for years or you're coming home across the city to go home for Thanksgiving, and you realize, and it hits home continuously, that your life is really the only one that has materially changed. And what that feels like, and how that sometimes haunts us, how that sometimes creates a little guilt, how sometimes there may be some shame around it or some separation. That we may feel from different people in our family. The idea of what are the right financial boundaries. Some people I've talked to feel like they want to give financially to their family very regularly in order to meet the sacrifice that they made in order to make their life possible.
I love that.
Some people feel, I need to hold financial boundaries because I need to be able to save. I need to have financial stability and create that for my own family. There's no right or wrong answer, but how it is that coming home and even going on a vacation, I don't know if you've had this feeling. I've definitely gone to some beautiful places in my life and then all of a sudden it hits you. I wish my mom could experience this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other of our peers don't have those thoughts.
Yeah.
And so acknowledging that that's really normal and that we're all having those thoughts. Because when we think about the first gen experience, I did a national poll that kind of predated this book by about a month, because I wanted to kind of look at some of these things that feel anecdotal that we're talking about, but we know that are widespread, but let's look at some data. And what I want to center here in this conversation is we obviously asked, if it was a negative experience to have the first gen student experiences for first gen students, and 65% said yes, right? But the reasons were really interesting. Imposter syndrome, like I told you, I've always had a bone to pick with imposter syndrome because it's, again, I think a bit one-dimensional. Not that I don't believe it exists, but the way it's kind of lobbed at us, I think, is unfair.
100% agree. Mm-hmm.
A crisis of confidence. But imposter syndrome was the last reason. The number one reason was financial trauma, which is not surprising. But the number two reason for this being such a negative experience for us was loneliness and isolation. Yeah. And that's why I wrote the book. That's why I want to talk about these issues. And thank you for providing a platform here to talk to your listeners about it. Because that feeling of sometimes shame or guilt or loneliness or isolation of these feelings is part of what takes a toll on us. And it is so common. I see you nodding.
Yeah.
And that's all I see are nodding heads when we talk about this. So let's not feel like there's something wrong with us. Yeah. Let's be vulnerable enough to share this with each other so we all feel less alone.
Yeah. And it's wild how many folks like often think they are alone in these feelings, right? And I think it's important, to share with listeners is like most of the time you are not alone in what you were feeling, and the first way to start to feel less alone is to start to create the space to be safe and being vulnerable with others, right? And feeling that permission, and I think that you're helping give that permission también,
Well, vulnerability creates this connective tissue. And I learned this really young. And it's a story that I tell in the book about, being in a nonprofit when I was a child. My mom had put me there. She had just come out of a really chaotic relationship and was dealing with postpartum depression. And I was kind of on my own, right? That loneliness and isolation in this really pivotal time where your identity is just confusing. And they asked us to write a play because it was a nonprofit that used like the arts to help kids develop confidence. And I wrote a play and they performed it with professional actors at UCLA. Totally unbeknownst to me, the actress they had chosen to be in the play had just come off of doing the movie What's Love Got to Do with It with Angela Bassett,
wow.
right?
Wow.
And invited her to the play. I didn't know this. And so I'm walking through the audience like a kid and I feel a tap on my shoulder and I turned around and it's her just radiant and smiling and a superstar, this energy that this woman exudes. And she says, I just wanted to tell you that I really identified personally with what you wrote. And my head kind of exploded as a kid because how could she, having such a different life, have related to what I wrote? But that in a lot of ways was the impetus to, my love of writing and creativity, and also my kind of the way I've been drawn to vulnerability as being a way to alchemize pain, right? Because sharing these things, it makes us all feel less alone, and it actually creates a community. And I'm not saying people have to write a book or have to go out and share painful parts of their lives publicly. But that vulnerability is our strength, especially as Latinos. The energy, the humility, the vulnerability that our community has to wrap around each other is one of the most beautiful things of our community. Yet in this space, like how can we be a little more vulnerable to each other? Because we want to believe that we have it all together. There's that saying, when you're skating over thin ice, your speed is your safety. When you're first and only, a lot of this feels like you have to keep moving and move fast because that ice is crumbling under your feet. If you stay too long, you won't be the one to change everything, of break cycles, of breaking into new social classes. It feels like there's this time ticker. But taking a moment and realizing how many of us are walking beside each other in this experience, that makes a big difference, because many times we don't get that validation from our families.
Yes.
That's something I talk about in the book too.
Oh my God. God. I mean, there's so many things that I want to comment on that you just shared. So I'm really grateful. I'm so grateful because our listeners are getting so many gems. But I think something I wanted to share that came up right now was that I remember the freedom I found in finally letting myself be more vulnerable and taking off the mask of perfectionism, right? And I also, I went to Stanford, and I think from a very young age, I started to feel like I went to Stanford. I need to. Everyone is expecting me. This is what people expect of someone that went to Stanford, right? And so, the freedom and being able to be vulnerable and share, that doesn't mean I have my shit together. That doesn't mean I always have my shit together. It may mean a few things, but there's a lot of things it does not mean. And I remember several years ago, asking, catching up with somebody and asking them, how are you doing? And they basically said, I don't know what I'm doing. It was kind of their response. And having someone say that back to me, I remember it being, I'm like, wow, it's okay to say that. And I felt so seen by them saying that to me, that it started to allow me to take back the fullness of who I am. That is a complex being that on some days has their shit together and on some days does not, right? And that is okay. And I'm just as beautiful when I do or when I don't.
Well, you're touching on two very big things, and our community is the perfectionism and the pressure.
Yeah.
Right. The pressure is immense. I mean, I talk a lot about mental health in this book because that pressure is why I developed a pretty acute panic disorder as a child. And I kind of take you through how it moved through my life. And by the time I was in college, almost derailed my capacity to finish college.
Yeah.
And when mental health issues on average start around 14, and you think about our community being the first to go to college in many ways, there looks like there's an answer there about why, even though we're a third of college students, only 90% don't graduate on time.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's something going on during that time. And a lot of it is mental and emotional health. But the perfectionism, I want to pull on that thread a little bit, because many times, again, that's not to take away from the beauty and the grit that leads to this overachieving and being the one that believes beyond any doubt, against all odds, that you're going to be the one to break these cycles. I mean, that's just a beautiful light that our community carries. And many times, again, intertwined, there's both sides of the coin, that perfectionism can be a coping mechanism to some trauma in our childhood and some dynamics of not being supported. One of the trailblazer tools is the idea of being a parentified child. And many times we even minimize it to ourselves. I remember seeing in Encanto a lot of conversations about, that surface pressure song, and everyone really relating to feeling like you're doing all the emotional and physical labor for your family. But I remember thinking, let's not minimize it as eldest daughter duties. This is actually, parentification is an invisible childhood trauma that can lead to people-pleasing tendencies or hypervigilance and a lot of that pressure that we're talking about, and a lot of this mental health piece. And that's not to point fingers at our family or to blame anyone, because I know, I'll speak for myself, people were doing the best they could. And it's not about that, but it doesn't betray our families to acknowledge some of our experiences and to see that perfectionism and that drive, there has to be a point where it also gets to balance.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we start achieving, we keep achieving. But again, our personal and our professional lives can feel out of whack.
Yes.
I know that was a big moment for me to examine that and to look at, okay, when does it feel like it's enough? When do you allow yourself that luxury and privilege and cycle breaking of having that ability to be able to rest?
Yes. And I think that really, I'll share really quickly. I actually suffered from performance anxiety, a lot of anxiety, so I resonate with your speaking about panic attacks to the point that I couldn't speak in front of a public. And I think it was very much related to this perfectionism that I grew up with. And the podcast actually helped me to start to, and other things really slowly pushing me in healing from what really became a paralyzing fear. And it was so rooted in perfectionism and shame that I think, we can trace to a lot of the things that you're talking about. So I think this is a really important topic. But I think what you were starting to get to right now is something you talk about in the book about being able to celebrate who you are versus what you've accomplished, right? And I think I have noticed, and this is true for me and perhaps you too, is how when you get stuck in this cycle of overachievement and perfectionism and all these things, you start to associate that worth with accolades. And then it does feel like you're in this loop of searching for that next accolade in order to feel validated and never feeling enough. And I've seen it with friends that are my age still that are so successful on paper, but some of them have, more issues with self-worth and fulfillment and self-love than folks that maybe are less successful on paper.
Well, that's why this work is so important, and I don't say this because I have it all figured out, because I don't. Yeah. And I say that in the book. Yeah. I'm on my own journey like everyone else, but that's why, especially for first and onlys, those of us that are first gen, it's so important to do this work because, we can get out of whack. We can kind of break through these glass ceilings like everyone tells us to, but not acknowledge the truth, which is there's shards of glass coming down all around us. And usually we're the only ones cleaning them up.
Yeah.
And when many times, especially with the parentification part, we've shoved down our feelings repeatedly kind of to the benefit of keeping the peace or being the little adult or being the perfect one who has no feelings. I don't know about you, but for me, that definitely, I thought that kind of not rocking the cart ever with any of my feelings was a way to be a good girl, a good XYZ, whatever that was. And actually calling on what those experiences are and those feelings were was a big part of my healing. But it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process to be intentional. And honestly, the first step is this one.
Yes.
I don't come to some big conclusion at the end. Sorry to break the ending for people who haven't read it, but there is no big conclusion of how to fix all this. The conclusion is to acknowledge this in ourselves and to stop abandoning ourselves by disavowing the truth of our own experiences.
Yes. And taking the pressure for the goal to be maybe to have it all figured out. I think I love what you said about, can we just every day, try to be a better ancestor? And that doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean having it figured out. It starts with understanding ourselves. And I also really love about when you were talking about invisible inheritances, right?
Well, what I experienced in high school around this perfectionism as a coping mechanism is the more kind of chaotic one of my relationships were, and I take you kind of into this puppy love in my high school years, and it was very chaotic, and the more hot and cold it was, the higher my grades would go. The more pain I was in, the higher my grades would go. And you can see how it can be a way of kind of trying to feel some sense of control in your life by kind of overachieving, like we're talking about. But I say in the book really clearly, to your point, my goal is to not be a healing perfectionist, because that's another slippery slope. Like, it's real that we can go from like, okay, now I'm going to heal. I'm going to be the most perfect healer in the whole world. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to eat this. I'm going to go here. And what is that? That's pressure all over to do it exactly right. So what does it look like to give us grace for once? Give ourselves grace.
Yes, we all deserve that. I think one of the things I love about your book is that whether you're Gen Z and just starting sort of your trailblazer journey, or a millennial or older, and perhaps just finding the words for what you've felt for many years, you can take something from this book. And so I want to ask you, if you were to give like one final message, someone who is first gen, a trailblazer, maybe someone in their 20s, a millennial in their 30s, or someone in their 40s, what would you say? And does the message look different
It doesn't look different depending on where you are, because as we all know, we all figure out at different points. And if this can mark the trees for someone in their 20s, amazing. But some of this stuff came together for me only in the last 5 years. So we're all in different points of our journey. But the overarching message that I would say is, for many of us as first and onlys, we feel the pressure to bridge a lot of different things in our lives. The responsibility to bridge different dynamics in culture, ethnicity, communities, generations. We're kind of in the middle and we're trying to get it perfect. You lean too far this way and maybe you're called a sellout, or people say you've changed, but you go too far this way and you feel like you're perpetuating a cycle, or you're an outsider. It feels like this impossible kind of juggling act. And what I would say is that there is no action in what it is that we need to do as first and onlys. We already exist as the bridge. We don't have to actively try to bridge two things. We exist as a bridge. Those two things live in us without any action on our part. Our place is to exist as those two things as unapologetically as possible. To understand that we can have our Nike Cortez next to our heels and our loafers in the closet and not have to explain, not have to feel that have to be this way in this space or that way in that space, to be contradictory and like proudly contradictory. I don't feel the responsibility to make myself make sense to anyone anymore. I did for many years. And I think when we get to that place where I don't care if I make sense to you, because I can be all these things together, but just be it loudly. So if people walk away with that message, then, I did my job as a writer.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, I want to give time for our rapid fire questions, or matraca, basura, and calma. So I want to ask you, Alejandra, what are you giving your matraca to this week? What are you celebrating?
So I'm celebrating this week that, as of now, officially, First Gen's going to be translated into Spanish, which was really important to me. I didn't take it for granted that would happen. For those that don't know how this works, not every book is translated to Spanish, but, I'm Mexican American. The first chapter of this book is set in mostly Mexico, and it was really important to me for this to be accessible to our community. So I'm really happy about that.
That's wonderful. Matraca to that. Okay. And then what's going in the basura for you?
This is a literal and a figurative basura, which is, I did not get any trick-or-treaters, and I have the biggest bucket of candy in my house that I have been eating from nonstop, and it needs to go in the basura. I haven't done it yet, but I think I'm going to do it after we hang up today.
So no one came to your house?
No one came.
Oh no, that's my fear.
But
that's happened to me.
It, hospitable. I really did. I went for a walk that afternoon and kind of looked around, and maybe I need to decorate more.
Put a big sign for next year.
So you're like, free candy, eat it so I don't.
Okay. Well, hopefully next year you get some trick-or-treaters.
I hope so. Otherwise, I'm going to take the bucket. I'm just going to walk around and be like,
you know what? You could do that. That would be an unexpected surprise. People are not expecting.
It may scare some parents though. Like, who is this woman coming by and being like, please take my candy?
Yeah, that is a little weird actually. All right. And then lastly, what is giving you calma right now? What is helping keep you grounded?
So what's keeping me grounded is that, I kind of tacked on to my book tour for First Gen, a college tour, because even though, to your point, those of us in our 30s, 40s, and so on could relate to these themes in a lot of ways, if I could help someone connect these dots quicker than I did, especially when they're in the college years that are really tenuous, I want to do that. It's important to me. So I've been going to colleges across the country. I'm about to embark on another 2-week kind of across the country trip, and being with these young people and hearing their stories and hearing it's heartwarming, it's heartbreaking, and it's inspiring. And that's what's grounding me. Those hugs, those conversations, sometimes those tears, but they're tears, I want to believe, of release and relief.
Yes.
And that's when, taking it full circle to that vulnerability part and that connection part. there's a reason why these topics bring tears to our eyes. When we feel seen, that's what happens. And, that's the best part of this for me so far.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm feeling all the feels that I resonate with that deeply. Well, I just want to give you an opportunity to tell folks where to follow you, where to find you, what you have coming up. You talk about your book, anything you want to share to close this out.
Yeah. My handle is the same on Instagram and so on. It's A Campoverdi. And I'm totally in my DMs and on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to share what resonated with the book, if you pick up the book or have any follow-up questions, send me a message, tag me on your post. I'd love to hear what connects with folks about the book. And, on my Instagram, I have a list of the different places I'm going because I'm still on book tour and we'll be going into the next year. So come see me too. I'd love to see folks and talk about this topic in person.
Wonderful. So y'all heard, you can catch Alejandra live, hopefully in a city near you. Alejandra, I want to thank you so much for your time, for your book. Yeah, I really appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for holding this space for this important conversation.
Of course. We hope y'all enjoyed that conversation. And like I said, at the very least, feel a little less alone in what you're sharing and have community around you. So let's head right into our matracas, masuras, and calmas, and I'll give it a start. So my matraca this week, I have to say, these have been some. I've been struggling for the last few months in a few different ways, both personally and also with what's happening in the world. But again, as Brenda shared earlier in the episode, I'm always looking for how I can still bring in joy into my life. And I have to say, I love a spooky season. It's my favorite time of the year, and I've really had such a rich spooky season. And I just want to give a shout out to a few of the things that I got to do this season. I feel really fulfilled with my spooky season. I got to do a really wonderful pumpkin patch with my little nieces, and it is such a joy to get to go to these pumpkin patches when you have little ones in your life. So that gave me so much joy. I got to go finally, well into my 30s, to Halloween Horror Nights. I had never been. And I don't know how you are with scary things, Brenda, but for some reason, I cannot watch scary movies. They're too scary for me. They give me nightmares. And I don't know if I've talked about this already, but I can go to physical haunted houses or these kinds of things where people are dressed up and there's mazes and people are spooked. And I find that really fun. How are you with scary things, Brenda?
I've only gone once to Not Scary Farm, and I was like, you know what? I don't need to do that again. That was cool. One and done. And I find these things very expensive, but I'm glad that folks enjoy it. I'm glad that it works for you. For me, it just doesn't add up. It's so expensive for such little time to just be touched by strangers. So I'm a pass.
They don't touch you. They can't touch you. Or I don't know what you said, but they cannot touch you.
When I went, it was many years ago. But yes,
oh, okay.
I'm a no. I'm a hard no. That's a no for me. And about scary movies, to me, I really like movies that are, I guess, more psychological scary. So I love The Witch. The Witch is one of my favorite scary movies. Midsummer will freaking haunt you for the rest of your life. That one's really good. I don't know if this one counts, but on Netflix, there's this movie called El Conde, which is fascinating. It's thinking about Pinochet, the dictator in Chile, as Dracula. It's fascinating. So these are the sort of movies that I like. I don't like the traditional scary movies.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love Halloween Horror Nights. First time, but I've gone to other sort of smaller scale. But the production value is so high, Brenda. I mean, I just love the creation of different worlds. Like I actually also love Disneyland. I love Universal Studios, period. I love kind of these fantasy worlds that are created where you really feel like you're stepping into a different world. So I love that they do that. It's Universal Studios. So very, very high production value. I like the adrenaline. Yeah, it's super fun for me. It's and sadly, I feel like it's less scary than the real world.
Well, that's for sure. That's probably why that stuff is so popular, because it is a pause from the horrors that is the real world.
Of like real world. And then what else? I got to dress up for Halloween only one time, but I still did it, and I freaking loved my costume. Y'all, I was a taquero And so I had a little taquero outfit, like a bloody kind of like a dead taquero. And then I had a little table, sort of like the cutting board, essentially, that was attached to me, which I think was crucial. I had some tortillas. I had a fake knife. And then my girlfriend, she had a dress on, and she like basically had some yarn that kind of looked like tripas, and she super glued it onto her dress, like, and it looks like the shape of tripas like on her actual body, right? But then she had some como colgando, like loose. So what we would do is we would like grab the tripas that were kind of loose, put it on my cutting board, and then like offer people like tacos de tripa, and it was so fun.
So creative. Did you all like co-conspire for this and you build it yourself?
Yeah, we did it by ourselves, and we had a different. Initially, she was going to be al pastor, but then we like came up with this, and it ended up being so much better because we could actually sort of like actively sort of pretend to cut the tripa. So it was so much fun.
Yes, that sounds great. I love a costume that is unique, creative, that you make yourself. So I love that.
Yeah.
And if folks follow me on Instagram, you saw that I was a character from the 1980s movie Spaceballs, and my costume, I did make my costume. Between me and Jeff, I made it myself, but Jeff had to store buy his costume. So it was like a little bit of a combo, but I love Halloween. I love making a costume.
Yeah, I feel like you have really good costumes too, Brenda. I feel like we're both pretty good independently on our when we do dress up on costumes.
Yes.
And then lastly, yesterday, and actually I was going to text you about this, Brenda, but I got locked out of my apartment, so I didn't have my phone.
Oh no.
But
that's
I went
Ana Sheila moment. No.
Yeah, it wasn't my fault. But anyways, I went to Plaza de la Raza last night for the Dia de los Muertos celebration.
I love it. I went there last year. It's beautiful.
It's in your neighborhood, so I meant to text you, but it was really wonderful. So those are my Halloween, spooky season, just fall activities. But it took a while on that. But Brenda, what do you have? What are you giving your matraca?
Well, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity because it does give me joy, is to mention once again the fantastic retreat that I'm planning with Delcy Sandoval, the Encuentro retreat happening February 15th through the 19th in Puebla. I'm mentioning it now because the deadline has passed for folks to take advantage of the $1,600 rate. So the next tier rate is $1,800. It's still a tremendous value because you have 4 nights at this incredible hotel. That in and of itself would cost you so much here in the States. So gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous hotel. We're going to have yoga. We're going to have meditation. We're going to have hiking. We're going to go to 3 different places: Cholula, Puebla, Tepoztlán. All your food, all your transportation while you're there. The only thing that you have to pay in addition to the $1,800 is your flight to get there and the transportation from the airport to the hotel. If you all have questions, you can contact me directly at brenda@tamarindopodcast.com or go to tamarindopodcast.com/encuentro for all the details. That's what's giving me super matraca joy.
Beautiful. All right. So my basura. So I read this headline, I think yesterday or so, but a few days ago. Dozens of states sue Instagram parent Meta over addictive features and youth mental health harms. So the AG for New York, Letitia James, who I'll have to give a matraca to on another episode, she joins 33 attorney generals in a lawsuit against Meta, she says has profited from children's pain by intentionally designing its platforms with manipulative features that make children addicted to their platforms while lowering their self-esteem. Social media companies, including Meta, have contributed to a national youth mental health crisis, and they must be held accountable. The lawsuit accuses Meta of violating a range of state-based consumer protection statuses, as well as a federal children's privacy law known as COPA, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, that prohibits companies from collecting the personal information of children under 13 without a parent's consent. So, I mean, I think I'm just putting this on us. I mean, I think we know this, we've known this, but it just highlights what a serious this issue this is. I don't think this just applies to children. I think that very much applies to adults in terms of the addiction and the effect on adult self-esteem as well. But I think, it's calling out children because they are more vulnerable. They might not have resources as available to work through some of the issues that happen as a result of what social media does to folks. So it's, I don't know what the answer is. So we're not going to explore that right now, but it's hard. I feel like we are in a very vulnerable time in terms of mental health, in terms of loneliness. Like these are real epidemics that require real,
correct. Mm-hmm.
that require real change, from everyone, but of course at the policy level. So it's something that's really important to be paying attention to, y'all. And I don't know, Brenda, if you want to add anything to that.
So to be clear, the basura is to the practice of Facebook. The matraca is to Letitia James, who's going to try to get their asses. So yes, absolutely. It's trash. And I think that's you're pointing to like, what can we do? Well, it looks like there's somebody doing something about it. So I guess we could champion more of these sorts of practices and just celebrating any time leaders can step up and hold these companies accountable. So absolutely agree with you that this behavior is basura.
Yeah. Brenda, what about your basura?
Well, sometimes we balance it out. There's like a real serious basura and then there's just like a silly one. So here's my silly one. I wish that there was like some sort of service that could, without me doing anything, just know all of my friends, like the calendars of all of my friends, and just say, hey, Brenda, you want to hang out with these 3 people? It's going to work on Thursday, November, whatever. Because it has been a pain in my ass to schedule things where it's like, if there's more than 2 people trying to get together, to find that alignment of when the 3 of you are available is a pain in the ass. I'm sick of scheduling. So basura goes to scheduling. I'm ready for the microchip. Like, get in my fucking brain. If I don't have to do shit and you can plan a time for me to hang out with my friends that works for everybody without me having to go back and forth and texting people, please get that microchip in my brain.
Yeah. I mean, scheduling is a pain, and it does feel like it's getting harder. I feel like it's exceptionally hard for folks that live in LA. Because there's just so much that goes into our constraints of actually getting together, and we just have so many plans. Yeah, I feel that. I would love something like that.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. It seems magnified in LA because you always have to factor traffic. Like if you're my friend on the West Side, God bless you, I will never see you again. If you have a kid, I'll never see you again. It's never going to happen. Adios.
Right.
So.
One thing that I've been doing is like, when I would like to see more than one person, is like having an event that I'm going to go to. And then just like, if there's people that I've been like trying to get together and it's been hard, I'll be like, hey, I'm going to this. If you want to go, like we can actually meet up, and just whoever comes through. Like seeing pressure.
A ver qué pasa. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, what's your calma, Ana Sheila?
My calma, again, I don't know if I've already shared this with y'all, but I'm going to share it again. Playing salsa music in the mornings has been giving me a lot of calma. I'm always looking for like what things help my morning feel better, give me more joy. And just salsa music, like you can't help, at least me, can't help but feel happy when I listen to salsa music. And it makes me also feel more grateful to be, I'm not Puerto Rican, I'm Mexican, but just like I think we, Spanish music, a lot of from different countries, it still gives us a lot of joy. And I just feel so connected to salsa. And I just feel grateful that it's a music that just, feels so connected to my heart and my soul. So salsa music in the mornings.
Yes, That sounds awesome. I could see that bringing a lot of calma. My calma is just the adventurous spirit of my parents. They are currently in Spain. They have rented a car and are going to every city that you can think of in northern Spain, just like going for it and driving in a country that they don't know, but it's better than our country. And they speak Spanish, so it's easier to get around. But I'm so grateful because we know that there's always an expiration date to when our family and parents and loved ones are healthy and active and able to be around. So I'm just very, very appreciative to see them have each other and to be able to explore the world and just really, really taking retirement by the horns. So that's what's giving me calma.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Brenda. I feel that very hard with my family as well. All right, y'all. Pues that's our episode. We hope y'all enjoyed it, and we hope que se cuiden, que estén bien as well as possible. We love y'all.
Yes. Ciao. Pon tu suéter. Tamarindo podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Ana Sheila Victorino, with production support by Karina Riveroll of Sonoro Media. Jeff Ricards produced our theme song. To learn more about us and get in touch, go to tamarindopodcast.com.
Besties, and welcome to I Am Besties. I'm Stephanie Ramirez.
And I'm Vanessa Casares. We're two Latinas coming together to create a space for heart-to-heart chit-chats on everything that matters.
From relationship advice to empowering women, exploring spiritual insights, and healing trauma, we've got it all covered.
We're your go-to besties, sharing personal stories and bringing on inspiring guests for an engaging and entertaining listening experience.
I Am Besties, where you'll find laughter, love, and a supportive sisterhood. Join us and be a part of the family.